Ancient Egypt has long fascinated humanity, a civilization of monumental ambition and hidden knowledge. Across deserts and riverbanks, massive pyramids, enigmatic statues, and intricately carved temples stand as silent witnesses to achievements that continue to challenge understanding. Some structures reveal precision that defies modern engineering, while inscriptions hint at rituals, technologies, and beliefs that remain only partially understood. From missing tombs to vanished labyrinths, from carvings that seem to depict impossible machines to texts written in a language of mystery, the relics of Egypt pose questions that science has yet to fully answer. As we uncover Egypt's enduring enigmas in this video, history and mystery intertwine, revealing the secrets left behind by a civilization whose reach stretched far beyond what the surviving evidence can explain, and whose mysteries continue to spark wonder across centuries. The Great Pyramid's impossible precision. In the northern desert of Giza, the Great Pyramid rises from the plateau with a stillness that defies time. Its limestone blocks, long stripped of their polished casing, reveal a geometric structure so exact that even modern engineers hesitate to call it primitive. Constructed more than 4,000 years ago, it remains not just a symbol of ancient power, but a riddle of mathematics and craft. From its alignment with the cardinal points to the near-perfect dimensions of its base, the monument stands as an enduring question carved into stone. Surveyors who have studied its foundation note that the pyramid's sides deviate from true north by only a fraction of a single degree. Such precision, achieved on a scale of millions of tons of stone, should have required instruments of accuracy unknown in the ancient world. Yet no evidence of advanced surveying equipment has been found. The Egyptians left no blueprints, no surviving diagrams of measurement or method. What they left instead was the result, a structure whose design mirrors a perfection even modern builders find difficult to replicate. Archaeologists have long debated how such accuracy was possible. Some argue that the alignment could have been achieved through careful astronomical observation, perhaps by tracking the rising and setting of circumpolar stars. Others suggest that solar shadows or water levels provided a natural guide, but each explanation carries uncertainty, for none accounts for the uniformity across every face and corner of the structure. Even the slightest miscalculation in its early foundation would have magnified over its 146-meter height, yet the monument remains symmetrical to a level that defies ancient tools of measurement. The base of the pyramid stretches more than 230 meters on each side, yet the difference between its longest and shortest measurements is less than the width of a human hand. The stones themselves, quarried from nearby plateaus, were set with such precision that even today, a thin blade cannot easily pass between them. The interior passages are equally baffling, long corridors cut through granite with smoothness and angular consistency that modern diamond drills would struggle to achieve. How those cuts were made and how the blocks were moved into position within confined spaces remains one of the great unsolved challenges of Egyptology. The Great Pyramid's orientation toward true north may hold the greatest mystery of all. Astronomical alignment on this scale requires not only a sophisticated understanding of the Earth's rotation, but also methods for compensating for magnetic variation and time. No other ancient culture, not even the Greeks centuries later, achieved such accuracy in monumental construction. When measured against the curvature of the Earth, the pyramid's proportions also reveal a set of mathematical relationships that seem to anticipate geometry developed long after the Old Kingdom. Some have suggested coincidence, others suspect a lost system of measurement based on natural constants. Inside, the king's chamber demonstrates the same impossible precision. Each granite block is identical in shape and size, fitted so tightly that no mortar is needed. The chamber's alignment to the structure as a whole is exact to within millimeters. It stands beneath a series of relieving chambers designed to distribute weight evenly, a feat of structural engineering still admired by modern architects. The purpose behind such care is uncertain. Some believe it reflected religious devotion, the need for eternal perfection. Others see it as evidence of scientific discipline, a geometry so refined it bordered on sacred. The question extends beyond technique into intent. Why build with such accuracy when a lesser tolerance would have sufficed? Was it aesthetic, symbolic, or something deeper an understanding of proportion tied to the cosmos itself. The ancient Egyptians viewed order as divine, embodied in the concept of ma'at, the balance that sustained creation. To construct a monument aligned with the heavens may have been, in their eyes, to preserve that cosmic harmony in stone. Yet how they achieved it remains unsolved, leaving only speculation wrapped in measurable perfection. Modern experiments attempting to replicate the pyramid's precision have yielded limited success. Scaled models can be aligned with accuracy when guided by satellites or lasers, but not by ancient means. Theories of ramps, counterweights, and levers explain the lifting of stones, yet none account for the faultless geometry across such vast dimensions. It is as though each block was placed within an invisible framework of exactness, known only to its builders. Time has eroded its surface, earthquakes have shifted its foundation, and still the Great Pyramid holds its symmetry. The monument remains silent, its measurements unaltered, its secrets unrevealed. What began as an expression of divine order now endures as a monument to unanswered questions. Beneath its shadow, the desert wind moves across the stones like the passage of centuries, and the precision of the Great Pyramid endures a perfection carved by hands that should not have been capable of such exactness. The lost technology of pyramid construction. Long before the pyramid stood complete, the plateau thundered with sound. The strike of dolerite pounders, the grind of rope against stone, the murmur of thousands working in ordered rhythm, an empire's heartbeat rising from the sand. Yet, from that immense effort, no machine, drawing, or method survives to show how millions of limestone and granite blocks became a monument of perfect geometry. The Great Pyramid endures, but the technology that raised it has vanished as completely as the voices that once filled the desert air. What modern engineers face, the ancients somehow overcame. Each block, weighing several tons, had to be quarried, transported, and set with precision upon the one before it. The tools discovered, simple copper chisels and rounded stones, seem laughably inadequate for the task. To cut granite, shape limestone, and lift it hundreds of feet without cranes or pulleys defies logic. Even under today's conditions, with machinery and steel, replicating that process at the same scale remains nearly impossible. What remains of the process is scattered across the landscape. Abandoned quarries show channels of half-severed rock, streaked with the marks of tools that left no consistent depth. On the plateau itself, fragments of ramps and compacted earth hint at an immense logistical system now erased by time. Near the base of the pyramid, ancient graffiti teams of workers, named after royal symbols, record organization, but not technique. These clues, pieced together like shards of pottery, only deepen the question of how such precision emerged from tools so primitive. Across the Giza Plateau, blocks weighing more than a dozen tons, each fit together with seams thinner than a human fingernail, yet no mortar binds them. The faces of the stones interlock with a precision suggesting some form of leveling or cutting far beyond simple chisels. Microscopic studies reveal parallel striations consistent with high-speed abrasion, as if the tools had moved with mechanical rhythm rather than human effort. Some engineers point to this as evidence of lost methods of vibration cutting or sonic manipulation techniques hinted at in fragmented temple inscriptions that describe stones that sang when struck in sequence. If such accounts hold even a fragment of truth, the question shifts from what the ancients built to how they understood the forces that moved stone itself. Every proposed method collapses under its own weight. Theories of long, straight ramps demand more material than the pyramid itself. Spiral designs fail to explain how alignment remained perfect when visibility was lost. Lever systems require supports that would have sunk into the sand. Others imagine cranes or internal lifts far beyond the mechanical understanding of the era. Each explanation offers a fragment of plausibility, yet none stand firm under scrutiny. Archaeologists uncover evidence of effort, but not of method, an absence that speaks louder than proof. Thousands of years later, engineers return to the desert to test their hypotheses. Using modern tools and manpower, they attempted to recreate the ancient techniques at a fraction of the original scale. The results were humbling. Stones slipped, ropes frayed, angles shifted, Even with precise calculations and safety equipment, no team could match the uniform accuracy of the original structure. The experiments revealed something beyond brute force or manpower, an unknown principle of coordination, balance, or mechanical insight lost in translation from one age to another. Beneath the machinery of construction were men who understood weight, friction, and leverage with instinctive mastery. Archaeological records suggest that the builders were not slaves, but skilled laborers, organized into specialized crews. They left behind bread ovens, medical supplies, and workshops near the base of the plateau, a city of artisans rather than captives. Their knowledge, passed through hands and memory rather than text, seems to have perished with them. It was a technology of practice, not theory, invisible to history's record yet visible in stone. Each discovery answers one question and raises another. Evidence of copper chisels suggests soft stone work, yet granite statues polished to a mirror sheen defy that explanation. Marks found on blocks imply a system of dragging and wetting sand to reduce friction, but the mechanics of lifting remain unsolved. The more we uncover about their methods of organization and scale, the more alien the final achievement appears. Science can measure its accuracy, carbon date its quarries, and analyze its minerals, but the process by which raw stone became living architecture remains hidden behind silence. In the silence of Giza, the question of how endures heavier than stone. The missing capstone of the Great Pyramid. At the top of the Great Pyramid, the line of stone stops too soon. The structure rises in flawless geometry until it meets the open air, where a single point should have brought its perfection to completion. Instead, the summit is flat, silent, and strangely unfinished. The absence of its apex transforms the monument from a mathematical triumph into an eternal question. It is as if the pyramid was designed to end in mystery, its highest secret taken away before history could record it. Travelers from antiquity noticed this absence and struggled to explain it. Ancient Greek writers described the pyramid as already incomplete, its summit exposed to the desert Sunday. Centuries later, medieval chroniclers spoke of a shining stone that once crowned the monument, smooth as glass and visible from miles away. Arab historians of the 12th and 13th centuries described a golden cap reflecting sunlight across the sands, while others mentioned inscriptions upon it, symbols said to hold the wisdom of an age long forgotten. Yet no artifact has ever surfaced to confirm such accounts. The peak remains bare, the memory of what once stood there fading into speculation. Archaeologists who have climbed the summit describe rough limestone blocks that seem truncated rather than finished. The top platform measures roughly 9 meters across, a small terrace with uneven surfaces, suggesting that some structure once rested upon it. No mortises or sockets remain to show how a capstone might have been anchored, though the erosion could have erased such details long ago. In the absence of evidence, each generation of explorers has imagined its own explanation, some envisioning a pyramidion of gold, others of polished white limestone that caught the dawn light like fire. In Egyptian thought, however, the pyramid's summit was never merely structural. It embodied a concept older than kingship itself. The apex represented the benben, the sacred mound that emerged from the primeval waters at the dawn of creation, upon which the sun first rose. The Temple of Heliopolis once held a stone of this name, revered as the point where heaven touched earth. Each pyramid echoed this cosmic moment, its form symbolizing ascent from chaos to order. The missing capstone, then, was not just a fragment of architecture, but the culmination of a sacred geometry, the final union between the human and the divine. Some scholars propose that the capstone may have been removed deliberately during later dynasties, perhaps as part of a religious transformation. When Egypt turned from solar worship toward other deities, symbols of the old faith may have been dismantled. Others suggest it was lost through the violence of time, earthquakes, looting, or quarrying during the medieval period. Fragments from the outer casing were stripped to build mosques and fortifications in Cairo, and the missing apex could easily have shared the same fate. Yet none of these explanations feels conclusive. The absence of the capstone remains too precise, too deliberate, as if its removal carried meaning beyond practicality. Modern theorists, both academic and speculative, have added further layers to the mystery. Some architects argue that a golden or electrum-plated pyramidion would have symbolized the sun itself, catching the first light of day and crowning the structure with divine radiance. Others suggest the capstone was never placed at all, that the builders left it incomplete as a deliberate symbol, the human striving for perfection that can never be reached. In the more imaginative corners of fringe archaeology, theories propose that the capstone functioned as an electrical conductor, part of a system designed to harness or transmit energy from the earth to the heavens. Though unsupported by evidence, such ideas reveal the depth of fascination that the pyramid's missing peak continues to provoke. From a symbolic perspective, the absence might hold greater meaning than the stone itself. The missing summit transforms the pyramid into an open structure, its apex pointing not to an artifact, but to the sky. It stands as a monument to aspiration rather than achievement, an eternal reaching that mirrors humanity's own incomplete understanding of the past. Perhaps its designers understood that no monument could ever capture divinity in full, and so they left the work unfinished, allowing the final step to belong to eternity. The pyramid points upward, toward a perfection that was never meant to be found. The Sphinx's water erosion debate. When a geologist declared that the Sphinx was carved by rain, not wind, the timeline of Egypt cracked open. The statement seemed impossible, an act of defiance against centuries of accepted chronology. The Sphinx had always been understood as a monument of the Old Kingdom, its age measured by the reign of Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BCE. But if water had shaped its body, that meant the monument had endured a climate far wetter than the desert plateau of Giza had seen in millennia. The claim did not merely question the age of a single monument, it challenged the foundation upon which Egyptian history was built. Dr. Robert Schoch had not set out to challenge history, only to read the stone. Trained in geology, not archaeology, he was brought to Giza in the early 1992 by the independent researcher John Anthony West, who suspected that something about the monument's weathering did not align with its accepted age. Where Egyptologists saw millennia of wind and sand, Schoch saw signs of long, sustained rainfall. The fissures that marked the Sphinx's body were vertical, rounded, and deep patterns that wind could not easily carve. His instruments measured the curvature and erosion depth, comparing them to natural weathering seen in cliffs exposed to heavy precipitation. To his eye, the Sphinx was not merely old, it was prehistoric. What he saw in the limestone walls defied the desert itself. The Sphinx enclosure, carved into the bedrock, showed patterns of water runoff descending in vertical sheets. The stone had softened, its surface rounded by moisture, not abrasion. Even the deeper cuts around the monument's body displayed undulating shapes reminiscent of riverbanks, not sand-blown dunes. Geological strata suggested that such erosion could only occur over thousands of years, in a climate where heavy rains once fell. The Sahara, now dry and lifeless, would have had to be lush and storm-swept for centuries. Such conditions, Schoch argued, existed around 7000 to 9000 BCE, long before the rise of dynastic Egypt. Seismic soundings taken near the Sphinx revealed curious anomalies, zones of differing density that hinted at hidden cavities beneath the monument's pores. Some early readings suggested that these voids might be chambers sealed by erosion and sediment. Though no direct excavation confirmed the idea, the data intensified the sense that the monument's foundation concealed as much as its weathered form revealed. To those who supported Schoch's timeline, these buried spaces became symbols of a forgotten age, silent vaults beneath a sculpture too old to belong to the civilization that claimed it. If the Sphinx had endured heavy rains, it must have stood when the Sahara was green. That implication placed the monument's origin at least 4,000 to 5,000 years earlier than the reign of Khafre. The pharaoh's face, then, might have been recarved over an older body, an ancient sculpture inherited by a later civilization that no longer understood its maker. To accept such an age would mean acknowledging an unknown culture capable of monumental architecture, thousands of years before the Egyptians we know. It suggested continuity, a transmission of knowledge across a gulf of forgotten time. The Sphinx, long thought to guard the pyramids, might instead have been the relic of a world erased by flood and climate. To Egyptologists, the idea was heresy disguised as science. They countered that the erosion could be explained by groundwater, salt crystallization, or fluctuations in humidity rather than rain. The stylistic and cultural context, they argued, tied the Sphinx unmistakably to Khafra's reign. The facial features, the surrounding temples, and the quarrying techniques matched the known Old Kingdom timeline. No inscriptions or archaeological layers hinted at an earlier builder. The monument, they insisted, was not a remnant of a lost civilization, but a product of human evolution, perfectly placed within Egypt's historical arc. To suggest otherwise was to discard not only evidence, but the methods that gave archaeology its authority. Shouk's findings were presented at conferences, met with polite interest and quiet dismissal. In geological circles, his analysis was considered plausible, even sound. But in Egyptology, the reaction was almost defensive. To accept his conclusion meant rewriting history books, rethinking climate records, and confronting the possibility of advanced human activity before known civilization. For scholars trained to guard chronology, that was an unbearable leap. The debate spread through documentaries, journals, and academic disputes, each side entrenched in its logic. The Sphinx itself remained silent, offering no inscription, no datable relic, nothing but stone shaped by forces older than language. The Sphinx endures on the edge of certainty, its weathered face marked not just by time, but by the long silence between science and the unknown. Hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx. For more than a century, the Sphinx has been studied in sketches, surveys, and measurements, yet the earth beneath it has never been disturbed. Every contour of its massive body has been mapped, every block of its temples catalogued, but the rock that lies beneath its pores remains a closed chapter. The monument seems both known and unknowable, a creature frozen between light and shadow, its silence undisturbed even by the tools of modern science. The question of what rests beneath has lingered longer than any inscription, echoing through the discipline that claims to understand it best. When radar first swept across the Giza Plateau in the late 1970 seconds, the technology was still young and untested on ancient ground. The equipment pulsed low-frequency waves into the limestone, translating echoes into ghostly maps of the subsurface. Most of the readings returned blank, a bedrock of dense uniformity, but beneath the Sphinx, the signals wavered. There were areas where the radar slowed, pockets where sound traveled differently. To the scientists reviewing the data, it looked as though something was interrupting the stone, as if chambers or cavities had been carved and then sealed by time. The first public hint came from seismic soundings led by geophysicists Thomas Dobecki and Robert Schoch in the early 1990 seconds. Their instruments recorded clear anomalies beneath the monument's front pores, rectangular voids that did not match natural fissures. The data suggested hollows at varying depths, perhaps chambers or tunnels running beneath the Sphinx's body toward the plateau. Though the readings were precise, the interpretation was cautious. The results could indicate ancient construction or natural erosion pockets. In the language of science, both possibilities remained equal, though one stirred far greater curiosity. Long before technology drew its maps beneath the sand, whispers of hidden rooms had already circulated through centuries of speculation. Greek travelers once claimed the Sphinx guarded the entrance to an underground hall. In later Arabic texts, it was said to conceal vaults of lost wisdom, repositories of a forgotten civilization preserved beneath the desert. When early explorers arrived in the 19th century, they noted the same legends repeated by local stories of sealed passages beneath the creature's pores that led to corridors no man had seen in living memory. For scholars, these tales were folklore, yet they survived because no one could prove them false. By the time Dobecki and Schoch's findings reached the press, the story had outgrown the data. Newspapers spoke of secret chambers, hidden libraries, lost archives of Atlantis. Egypt's antiquities authorities responded with restraint. Official excavations were limited to mapping and maintenance, and permits for deeper drilling were quietly denied. The concern was not only about preserving the monument, but also about controlling narrative. Too many past discoveries had spiraled into myth, threatening to undermine Egypt's archaeological credibility. The Sphinx, it seemed, was to remain unentered, its silence undisturbed by speculation. Even so, subsequent surveys using more advanced ground-penetrating radar in the early 2000s continued to detect irregularities. The shapes appeared geometric, sometimes rectangular, but the depth made confirmation impossible without excavation. Proposals to insert fiber optic probes met with administrative rejection. The official line held that no voids existed beyond minor fissures, and yet the published diagrams showed distortions too distinct to dismiss as geological chance. Beneath layers of regulation and restraint, the possibility persisted a space that had never seen light, resting under a monument that had watched the sun rise for thousands of years. Some researchers turned to older texts in search of validation. The enigmatic Hall of Records, mentioned by mystic writers like Edgar Cayce, was dismissed by scholars as modern myth, but the coincidence of underground anomalies gave the idea new endurance in popular imagination. For Egyptologists, this was a dangerous overlap between science and belief, a blurring that could undo decades of cautious work. For others, it was a reminder that the desert does not yield truth to those who wait politely. Every silence, they argued, conceals its own form of record. In recent years, the Sphinx has been scanned, imaged, and analysed in 3 dimensions, yet the mystery beneath remains untouched. The limestone still reflects every signal, but yields no clear answers. Beneath the monument's massive weight lies a void, measured, documented, and left unexplored. Whether it is a natural hollow or the residue of an ancient design, no one can yet say. The tools of science have mapped the unseen, but they have not crossed into it. The desert keeps its secret beneath the pores of the Sphinx, and the silence below remains unbroken. The tomb of Osiris beneath Giza. In 1999, Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass announced a startling find beneath the Giza plateau, a deep, water-filled shaft leading to what appeared to be a subterranean complex. The discovery, made during the clearing of a section near the causeway of Khafre's pyramid, immediately captured global attention. Local workers called it the Osiris Shaft, a name that soon took hold, drawn from the green-skinned god of the afterlife. For the first time in decades, the sands of Giza whispered of a chamber that might bridge myth and stone. The descent began through 3 levels carved into limestone, each separated by narrow passages slick with groundwater. On the lowest level, archaeologists found an island of rock surrounded by still black water, a pool that shimmered beneath their lights like ink. In its center rested a granite sarcophagus, massive and lidless, guarded by 4 stone pillars. Hieroglyphs in the upper chambers invoked Osiris, ruler of the dead, and spoke of resurrection beneath the earth. Yet, remarkably, there were no inscriptions identifying a king, no cartouches, no royal names at all. The silence of the chamber was as striking as its presence. Evidence suggested the structure was ancient, but not necessarily royal. Pottery fragments and tools indicated activity in the late period, perhaps around the 26th dynasty, though some geological features hinted at far older origins. The mixture of time, dynasties layered like sediment, left archaeologists divided. Was it a symbolic tomb, created to mirror the mythic resting place of Osiris, or something far older, reused and renamed by later priests seeking divine connection? The myth itself had always placed Osiris's burial in a secret chamber below the Nile, a place unreachable by mortal hands. To find such a setting beneath Giza, with its flooded corridors and islanded sarcophagus, felt almost deliberate, a literal translation of belief into architecture. Some Egyptologists speculated it might have been used in Osirian rituals, part of the ancient mysteries enacted to reenact the god's resurrection, but others saw danger in how myth and excavation began to overlap. The line between legend and stratigraphy blurred with each descent into the dark. Technology soon entered the debate. ground-penetrating radar and muon scans, the same methods used in the search for hidden rooms within the Great Pyramid, were directed toward the plateau's bedrock. Some readings suggested cavities branching beyond the known shaft, narrow voids perhaps leading deeper still. Yet others argued these were natural fissures, the kind that formed over millennia as groundwater carved the limestone. The scans themselves, ambiguous and incomplete, offered only shapes without context. The mystery deepened not by discovery, but by uncertainty. Amid the speculation, a handful of fringe theorists revived older claims that beneath Giza lay a vast underground network, a repository of forgotten records, the so-called Hall of Knowledge of pre-dynastic lore. They pointed to ancient writings that spoke of a door to the west of the Sphinx, of archives sealed before the first kings. Hawass and his team dismissed such notions outright, emphasizing that the Osiris shaft was ritual, not mythical. Still, for many observers, the setting was too evocative to ignore. The flooded chamber, the sarcophagus island, the silence, all seemed to echo something older than archaeology could comfortably measure. Further study in the early 2000s revealed no hidden tunnels beyond the shaft, only sediment, groundwater, and stone. Yet the site's precision remained peculiar. Its alignment with the Khafre Causeway, its deliberate engineering through layers of bedrock, and its symbolic correspondence to Osiris's myth left room for speculation. Even in its known form, the tomb seemed to serve more than a function. It embodied belief, carved into the earth itself. Years passed, and the Osiris shaft closed to the public, reopened and closed again. Conservation, safety, and myth competed for space in official reports. Tourists glimpsed the chamber only through footage, flickering lamps reflected on black water, the sarcophagus glinting in the light. For many, the image was unforgettable, a god's grave submerged beneath the cradle of civilization. And yet, the question remained unresolved, not of who lay within, but of why it was made at all. If it were purely symbolic, why such depth and precision? If functional, why the absence of all names? The chamber resisted interpretation, as though its builders intended not clarity, but permanence, a monument to mystery itself. The Osiris shaft still lies beneath Giza, silent and sealed, where water laps against stone in eternal stillness, and no one knows whether it was meant for a god, a man, or the memory of something that came before both, the vanished mummy of Khufu. Nobody has ever been found for the most powerful king of Egypt's Old Kingdom. The pyramid that bears Khufu's name stands as the greatest tomb ever constructed, an edifice of stone so vast that its base could contain a city square, its alignment so precise that it defies both chance and erosion. Yet inside, the sarcophagus lies empty. No mummy, no canopic jars, no funerary goods, only hollow chambers echoing with the silence of a vanished presence. For a king who commanded such immensity, the absence feels deliberate, as though his resting place were designed not to be found. When the Great Pyramid was first entered in recorded history, it was already bare. Ancient robbers, driven by the promise of gold, had long since broken through its passages, tunneling into the stone and leaving behind nothing but darkness and dust. By the time medieval travellers recorded their own descent, the sarcophagus in the king's chamber stood open and unguarded, its lid missing. No trace of a burial remained, no wrappings, no fragments of bone, not even a token of the afterlife. The greatest of all royal tombs had become a monument to nothing, its purpose obscured by its own perfection. By the 19th century, when scientific Egyptology began to take form, explorers like Richard Weiss, Giovanni Perring, and Flinders Petrie descended through the narrow corridors with precision instruments and expectations of revelation. They found only granite, geometry, and silence. The passages bore no inscriptions, the walls no decoration. Petrie measured every angle, every deviation from true north, as if the architecture itself might confess what the stones withheld. Khufu's name appeared only in red paint inside the upper relief chambers, a builder's mark rather than a royal signature. The king who had commanded such mastery of stone left not even the faintest sign of his body. Some have argued that the mummy was looted in antiquity, stolen in the earliest waves of tomb robbing that plagued Egypt's necropolises. Yet that explanation feels inadequate. The scale of the pyramid's construction, the sealed granite plugs blocking its passages, the complete absence of funerary goods, all suggest that no looter could have entered without leaving scars upon the structure. Others have proposed that Khufu was never buried within the pyramid at all, that it was merely a symbolic vessel, a cosmic engine, designed to ensure his ascension, not to entomb his flesh. The sarcophagus, then, may have been an altar rather than a coffin. Elsewhere in Egypt, the remains of other pharaohs endured. The mummies of Khafre and Menkaure, his successors on the Giza Plateau, were lost to history, but their temples bore the traces of their funerary cults. In the later dynasties, royal mummies were found intact within the Valley of the Kings, wrapped and labelled with care. Against this continuity, Khufu's absence stands as an anomaly, a blank, in an otherwise meticulous tradition. He was the age when the art of mummification reached perfection, yet the master of that era left no mortal trace. Perhaps the absence was intentional. The Great Pyramid, in its mathematical precision, seems less a tomb than a mechanism. Its internal shafts, aligned with the stars of Orion and the circumpolar constellations. To some, it embodies a metaphysical technology, a means to transmit the king's essence to the heavens. In this view, Khufu's body was never meant to remain within stone. It was transformed, dematerialized, or hidden in ritual secrecy. The empty sarcophagus becomes a symbol of transcendence, a deliberate void marking the boundary between the mortal and the eternal. Today, modern science continues to search for what ancient eyes could not find. Muon radiography, capable of mapping density variations within stone, has revealed unexplained cavities above the Grand Gallery spaces, large enough to conceal a burial chamber, yet unreachable without fracturing the structure. Archaeologists proceed cautiously, unwilling to violate the most studied monument on Earth, while the data lingers in ambiguity. Some call it proof of hidden architecture, others see nothing more than geological irregularity. The question remains suspended between disciplines, awaiting the moment when evidence outweighs reverence. No trace of Khufu has ever been recovered, not a fragment, not a tooth, not a nameplate of gold. His pyramid stands immovable, a monument to precision and absence, guarding the secret it was built to conceal. The Dendera light carvings. In the dim corridors of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, light reveals itself only in fragments. The air is still, heavy with centuries of incense and dust, and what little illumination filters in from the courtyard seems to hesitate before the walls. There, carved in soft limestone, are scenes that should belong to myth, but appear instead to echo the mechanisms of invention. A serpent uncoils within a long, bulb-shaped vessel, its tail connected to a pillar resembling an electrical socket. Priests stand beside it, arms raised in reverence. The image is ancient, yet it seems to anticipate something far beyond its time. The Temple of Hathor, one of the best-preserved sanctuaries of the late Ptolemaic era, was completed around 54 BCE under the reign of Cleopatra VII. Built on foundations older than written memory, it embodies a lineage of worship that stretches deep into Egypt's religious past. Dedicated to Hathor, the goddess of fertility, music, and celestial harmony, it was a place where light and sound were sacred phenomena. Within these chambers, rituals were performed to awaken divine energy, to mirror the movements of the heavens through human ceremony. Every wall, every pillar, holds a language of symbols that once translated the invisible into form. Among these carvings, one series stands apart. On the walls of a subterranean crypt beneath the temple, intricate reliefs depict what modern observers have called the Dendera light. The figures show elongated ovals resting on lotus stems, from which serpents emerge. Supporting these shapes are small figures and devices that appear to transmit or receive the serpent's motion. To ancient eyes, these may have represented mythic forces. To modern ones, they look strikingly like oversized lamps, complete with cords and emitters. When archaeologists first documented the carvings in the 19th century, they recorded them as scenes from the myth of creation, the serpent symbolizing energy emerging from the lotus of the primordial waters. But in the 20th century, alternative interpretations began to surface. Engineers noted the uncanny resemblance between the carvings and the structure of a Crookes tube, an early electrical device that produces light when current passes through a vacuum. The resemblance was so strong that a replica was built, and when connected to power, it glowed. The experiment did not prove ancient electricity, but it did renew fascination with what the Dendera artisans had intended to show. Egyptologists maintain that the carvings are strictly symbolic. The serpent, they explain, represents the god Har-Somptus, born from the lotus flower at the beginning of creation. The bulb is the womb of the sky, and the connecting line is the breath of divine power. Such imagery was never meant to be technical. It was metaphysical, a poetic language describing the birth of light as a cosmic event. Yet even among scholars, the question lingers: why this form, this precision, this odd departure from all other Egyptian iconography? Within the crypt, the reliefs are isolated from the rest of the temple, as though hidden for initiates alone. They are smaller, more enclosed, more secretive than the grand public scenes above. The chambers were designed for rituals unseen by ordinary worshippers, perhaps ceremonies of rebirth, perhaps alchemical reenactments of creation itself. Light, in that sense, was not merely illumination, but divine manifestation. Still, the craftsmanship of the images suggests an understanding of form and function that borders on technical. The details are deliberate, the geometry disciplined, as if the artisans wished to record more than myth. Modern researchers have scanned the chamber walls with high-resolution imaging, seeking traces of pigment or inscription that might clarify the carving's meaning. None have been found. The walls remain mute, their story caught between language and design. Engineers and Egyptologists continue to debate: could this be evidence of a symbolic electric light, or merely the convergence of imagination and coincidence? No inscription names the scene, no text explains its purpose. The silence of stone is its only testimony. Over time, the Dendera light has become a mirror for human interpretation, science seeing technology, faith seeing metaphor. Each generation projects its understanding of illumination onto the same carved lines, finding in them either confirmation of forgotten genius or proof of our own desire to see wonder where mystery once lived. Within the temple's lower chambers, where light collapses into shadow and every breath reverberates, the carvings glint softly, recalling a brilliance forgotten by the living. The Serapeum's giant stone boxes. No human hands today could lift them. The sarcophagi of the Serapeum of Saqqara weigh tens of tons each, carved with such precision that their surfaces meet in seamless joints, their interiors hollowed with exacting care. Even modern cranes would strain against their mass. Yet the ancient Egyptians not only quarried these stones, but also transported them underground, maneuvering them into chambers that descend beneath the desert floor. Each block is a testament to a skill both formidable and inexplicable, leaving scientists and engineers alike to question how such labor was possible without the machines of today. Auguste Mariette first revealed the Serapeum to the modern world in 1851, descending into tunnels that had been hidden beneath sand for millennia. The sight of row upon row of these colossal boxes astonished him. He measured them, documented their inscriptions, and marveled at the sheer audacity of their placement. These were not coffins of kings. They were tombs for the sacred Apis bulls, each animal considered a living incarnation of a deity. Still, the scale was unprecedented, and the methods invisible to modern reasoning. The sarcophagi themselves are staggering in dimension. Some extend over 3 meters in length, over a meter in width, and approach the weight of 70 tons. Their stone, primarily granite, imported from Aswan, hundreds of kilometers to the south, required transport across the river and desert, then precise placement into subterranean galleries. Every surface is polished, every angle squared, every cavity carved to accommodate a single sacred bull. The geometric accuracy is such that 2 men could scarcely wedge a thin blade between block and wall. Scholars can estimate weight, calculate leverage, and chart potential ramps, yet no method fully accounts for the feat without invoking an extraordinary combination of ingenuity, labor, and luck. Ancient engineers remain as mysterious as the stones themselves. Some theorize that sledges and lubricated tracks carried the boxes from quarry to pyramid plateau. Others suggest large teams using ropes and pulleys maneuvered them through inclined corridors. Yet each hypothesis collides with logistical reality. The galleries beneath Saqqara are narrow, the turns tight, the stones impossibly heavy. Even if 1,000 men had labored for months, the margin for error would have been near zero. How the Egyptians achieved such control over such weight in subterranean conditions remains unanswered. During the New Kingdom and later dynasties, the Apis cult continued to honor the bulls with elaborate rituals. Each sarcophagus was aligned along the gallery with care, positioned precisely in relation to others. The carvings and inscriptions inside celebrated the bull's divinity, yet the precision of placement suggests a purpose beyond religious homage. The corridors themselves, uniform and straight, hint at planning that combined mathematics, spatial awareness, and a mastery of forces that modern science struggles to replicate. At present, engineers have attempted to model the construction. Scale replicas and computer simulations calculate the forces required to move 70-ton stones. Yet even with advanced technology, the ancient methods remain elusive. The precision with which the boxes fit, the care taken in the excavation of the galleries, and the repeated success across multiple sarcophagi confound expectations. What appears achievable in theory proves nearly impossible in practice, leaving a lingering sense of disbelief. The stones carry other anomalies as well. Granite came from distant quarries, yet some appear to have been dressed before transport, others afterward. Tool marks suggest techniques lost to time, and subtle variations in alignment between chambers hint at knowledge of geometry or engineering that was extraordinary even by Egyptian standards. Every measurement, every angle, every polished surface raises further questions. How did they control friction, gravity, and manpower with such consistency across so many tons of stone? The Serapeum itself is silent, echoing only the faint passage of air and the footsteps of those few who venture beneath the desert. The giant stone boxes remain in place, unyielding, immovable, impervious to both sand and time. They carry no living memory, no key to their own construction. Their weight is not merely physical, it is intellectual, pressing upon every observer with the enormity of what humans achieved and what remains unexplained. The colossal sarcophagi of Saqqara lie entombed in sand, still impossible to move, still holding secrets beyond the reach of modern science. The pyramid texts esoteric language. Words etched in limestone speak clearly, yet their meaning slips through the mind like water through fingers. Inside the silent chambers of the pyramids at Saqqara, Unas, Teti, and Pepi I, the walls are covered with lines of hieroglyphs that claim to guide the dead king into eternity. They are both commands and prayers, assurances and riddles. To read them is to glimpse a consciousness that is meticulous, vast, and at once familiar and alien. Each glyph is precise, deliberate, yet the arrangement of words and phrases often defies straightforward translation. The pyramid texts are legible but not entirely knowable, a language that communicates across millennia while withholding its full meaning. The texts date to the late 5th and early 6th dynasties, around 2350 to 2250 BCE, marking the earliest corpus of written religious material in ancient Egypt. Carved directly into the walls of royal burial chambers, they were meant not for human eyes, but for the king's spirit. Scribes labored to inscribe formulas, names of gods, cosmic declarations, and instructions for the journey beyond death. Each pyramid, though similar in structure, contains variations in spelling, repetition, and sequence, suggesting local schools of scribes and perhaps divergent ritual traditions. Yet all converge on a single aim: the preservation and ascension of the deceased ruler. The spells themselves range from the practical to the astonishingly abstract. Some instruct the king's car to rise and join the imperishable stars. Others command deities to clear the path through the underworld. Still others contain what appear to be magical protections against unseen forces. Names of gods, animals, celestial bodies, and natural elements are woven into syntax that sometimes mirrors spoken Egyptian, but often departs from grammatical norms. Patterns emerge and vanish. Repetitions punctuate otherwise unique passages, and some lines resemble puzzles whose solutions are intentionally obscured. Unlike ordinary funerary texts, the pyramid texts employ intensely symbolic language. The serpent of regeneration, the bull of power, the starry bark of the sun all appear as both objects and agents. Verbs are not always actions, but transformations, conditions, or states of being. The syntax itself is sometimes circular, creating a temporal loop in which the king's body, spirit, and consciousness exist simultaneously in multiple realms. For a modern translator, the text can feel like poetry, incantation, and instruction, all at once, a voice speaking across time, yet with a cadence impossible to fully replicate. Carved not only in words but in placement, the pyramid texts occupy the walls, ceilings, and even corners of the burial chambers with deliberate intention. Certain glyphs and spells are positioned along overhead surfaces, tracing pathways that align with shafts pointing towards stars or circumpolar constellations. Corridors are inscribed sequentially, guiding the king's spirit along a ritual journey through stone, as if the architecture itself were a map of the afterlife. Some passages repeat in parallel chambers, suggesting that movement through the pyramid was mirrored in the recitation or activation of the spells. The physical arrangement, as much as the language, conveys meaning, a layered system in which orientation, sequence, and placement become integral to the magical efficacy of the inscriptions. The pyramid texts, therefore, are not simply written commands, but a multi-dimensional script where space and symbol merge to orchestrate a passage from mortality to eternity. Scholars have proposed multiple interpretations. Some insist the pyramid texts are ritual manuals, guiding the deceased through the perilous landscape of the duat. Others argue they encode cosmological knowledge, the motions of stars, the cycles of the Nile, or the principles of rebirth in metaphorical form. Fringe theorists have suggested hidden scientific or astronomical knowledge embedded in the arrangement of spells and glyphs. Each hypothesis illuminates part of the text, yet none can claim total comprehension. The esoteric nature is intentional. These were not writings for casual perusal, but for the king, priests, and perhaps select initiates alone. Although later religious writings, like the coffin texts or the Book of the Dead, sought clarity, the pyramid texts remain cryptic, resisting even their successors' explanations. While later texts expand, explain, and simplify ritual instructions, these earliest inscriptions preserve ambiguity. Some lines remain almost untranslatable, their words still resonant but their meaning lost, leaving only context and symbolism as clues. The texts were carved, preserved, and protected, but their full secret may have been intended never to be revealed to the living. Since the corpus spans centuries, software analysis and computational linguistics now seek to uncover patterns, repetitions, and motifs within it. Digital modeling reveals clusters of recurring symbols and unusual syntactic structures, but the results are suggestive rather than definitive. Even with all available technology, the pyramid texts retain gaps that resist closure. They are both readable and enigmatic, conveying instructions while defying total comprehension. The pyramid texts endure not as complete manuals, but as whispers from an era in which language itself was a bridge to eternity, a code both revealed and concealed, and a voice that remains forever, just beyond human understanding. The Abydos helicopter carvings. Within the sacred walls of Abydos, craftsmen carved hieroglyphs to honor Seti I, each line meant to immortalize the king's devotion to the gods. The temple, constructed in the 13th century BCE, is a labyrinth of corridors and sanctuaries, where every relief serves a ritual, political, or spiritual purpose. In these chambers, artisans inscribed depictions of offerings, deities, and royal achievements with meticulous care. The hieroglyphs were designed to last through eternity, a bridge between the mortal and divine, ensuring the king's presence remained woven into the cosmic order. Yet, amidst the familiar motifs, there exist shapes that have captivated observers for decades. Strange forms that twist and overlap, appearing to resemble machines beyond the imagination of ancient Egypt. At first glance, these images are startling. Some see elongated shapes that rise like a fuselage, others note wing-like appendages or coiled forms that recall rotors. Collectively, they have been dubbed the Abydos helicopter carvings, sparking both fascination and controversy. To Egyptologists, these are not evidence of ancient aviation, but the result of overlapping inscriptions, where recarving, plaster, and erosion have produced shapes that resemble modern vehicles. The original text honored the pharaoh and his divine associations, but centuries of modifications and restoration have created visual ambiguity that invites interpretation far beyond its intended meaning. The carving's unusual appearance is compounded by the temple's own chronology. Seti I's reign was firmly grounded in the 19th dynasty, a period of monumental building, but one lacking technology even remotely analogous to aircraft. Any suggestion that the carvings depict modern machines collides immediately with historical reality. Scholars emphasize that the artisans were masters of symbolism and stylization, often blending multiple layers of iconography into single panels. What appears to the untrained eye as a mechanical form is, in context, a sequence of hieroglyphs recarved over time to preserve or update ritual texts. Closer examination reveals that the carvings are not random. They align with ritual sequences within the temple, suggesting intentional placement rather than accidental coincidence. The so-called helicopter shapes appear primarily in panels associated with offerings, processions, and ceremonial inscriptions, indicating that their location held symbolic or narrative importance. Scholars note that these images often coincide with areas where older reliefs were recarved or updated, implying a deliberate effort to preserve previous inscriptions while integrating new ones. The layering of reliefs, combined with ritual placement, suggests that the anomalous forms are a byproduct of both reverence and adaptation, where the artisans balanced continuity with innovation, leaving behind patterns that modern eyes misinterpret but that were meaningful within the temple's ceremonial logic. To the eye untrained in hieroglyphs, the images provoke an uncanny impression. The overlapping reliefs create shadows, contours, and intersections that mimic mechanical components. The brain, conditioned to recognize familiar patterns, can interpret these abstract forms as something recognizable: a helicopter, a submarine, or even a modern aircraft. Optical illusion, combined with centuries of wear and repair, produces a phenomenon where history and imagination converge, making the temple simultaneously a repository of devotion and a source of inexplicable imagery. Photographic studies and oblique lighting further emphasize the anomaly, as images captured from certain angles accentuate the overlap of glyphs and plaster seams. Digital analysis reveals that the so-called rotors are formed from the tails of serpents, the curves of royal insignia, and the contours of traditional hieroglyphs, all converging to create forms that modern observers misread. These technical examinations have reinforced the argument that the shapes are a byproduct of artistic convention and restoration, rather than evidence of advanced technology. In the context of 13th century BCE Egypt, the shapes are as impossible as they are captivating. Artisans were deeply skilled in geometry, proportion, and symbolism, yet nothing in the period's material culture, tools, or written record hints at the knowledge required to conceive machines that fly. The apparent resemblance to contemporary vehicles is a striking example of how human perception seeks patterns and familiarity, even where none exist. It is a testament to both the enduring power of Egyptian art and the mind's capacity for projection. Yet the carvings continue to inspire speculation. Fringe theorists and enthusiasts have proposed that the images are evidence of lost technologies or ancient visitors from unknown civilizations, interpretations that the academic community widely rejects. Even so, the allure of the Abydos helicopter persists because it challenges expectations. A single misalignment, a palimpsest of hieroglyphs, and suddenly the past seems to whisper secrets it cannot truly tell. The carvings serve as a mirror, reflecting both the ingenuity of the ancient Egyptians and the modern desire to see the impossible in the ordinary. Centuries of devotion, restoration, and erosion have left the reliefs of Abydos at once sacred and enigmatic, a collision of intention and perception where history, art, and imagination converge. Even as scholars insist on the explanation of overlapping hieroglyphs, the forms continue to rise from the stone like impossible machines, inviting wonder where certainty cannot follow. The lost labyrinth of Hawara. Herodotus wrote of a palace so vast and intricate that even the most confident traveller could lose their way within its halls. He described a labyrinth at Hawara that surpassed the pyramids in both size and complexity, a sprawling network of temples, courtyards, and underground galleries that seemed endless. Every account of the structure emphasized not only its scale, but the artistry and ingenuity required to construct such a place. Pliny, Strabo, and later Roman writers marveled at its columns, halls, and chambers, asserting that no one could traverse it without confusion. In the minds of those who read these descriptions, the labyrinth was both a monument and a riddle, a palace that challenged perception and memory, its corridors a testament to human ambition and divine favor. Excavations in the 19th and early 20th centuries attempted to reconcile these historical accounts with the earth itself. Archaeologists, most notably Flinders Petrie, uncovered traces of walls, courtyards, and partial chambers near the pyramid of Amenemhat III. Stone blocks, remnants of decorated halls, and scattered foundations suggested the grandeur Herodotus described, but the labyrinth's full extent remained elusive. The vast subterranean galleries hinted at complex planning, yet much of the structure had been destroyed by time, floods, and later human activity. Archaeologists mapped what they could, but each discovery only deepened the sense that the labyrinth was more than could be apprehended, a structure that defied full reconstruction. Even in fragments, the architectural features astonished observers. The labyrinth combined above-ground courtyards with covered halls and deep underground galleries, each passageway potentially designed to confuse intruders while guiding priests and royalty. Columns were said to be carved with hieroglyphs and reliefs, walls adorned with depictions of sacred animals and celestial patterns. Passageways intersected with chambers in ways that modern engineers find difficult to reconcile, implying precise planning, an understanding of load-bearing design, and a mastery of spatial organization that remains impressive even today. The combination of scale, decoration, and complexity challenges assumptions about Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom construction techniques, and even partial remains continue to inspire awe. Yet what remains today scarcely matches the monumental proportions described in ancient texts. Time, sand, and later builders have erased much of the labyrinth's evidence, leaving only suggestions of walls and the occasional decorated stone. Modern surveys rely on comparative studies, historical accounts, and remnants scattered across the site, yet a comprehensive blueprint of the labyrinth is impossible. The discrepancy between the literary grandeur and physical evidence generates an enduring mystery. Was Herodotus's account exaggerated, or have centuries of lost concealed structures beyond imagination? Scholars debate the labyrinth's original purpose. Some assert it was primarily a royal tomb complex, extending Amenemhat III's pyramid with ceremonial chambers and galleries for the afterlife. Others argue it functioned as a temple or administrative center, its halls designed to impress, regulate, and record. Inscriptions, when preserved, point to ritual significance, linking the king's authority with cosmic order, but no surviving texts fully clarify how the complex was used. Perhaps it was all of these: palace, temple, tomb, and administrative hub, a multifunctional monument that challenged both visitors and scholars. Even with modern surveying, the labyrinth's construction defies easy explanation. The scale described by ancient writers implies massive manpower, precise coordination, and architectural knowledge that stretches beyond what is evident in other contemporaneous structures. How the Egyptians integrated subterranean galleries with above-ground courtyards, maintained structural integrity, and ensured symbolic alignment with sacred geography, remains uncertain. Each newly uncovered fragment prompts more questions about methods, materials, labor, and the ingenuity that allowed such a vast project to be completed in a pre-industrial age. Beyond architecture, the labyrinth occupied a central place in Egyptian cultural memory. Stories of wandering halls, hidden chambers, and sacred rites preserved its mystique for centuries, influencing travelers, historians, and later explorers. It became a symbol of human ambition confronting the infinite, a place where ingenuity met mystery, where the ephemeral nature of construction contrasted with the permanence of legend. Even in ruins, the labyrinth shaped perceptions of Egypt as a land of monuments challenge both understanding and imagination. The lost labyrinth of Hawara endures in memory, in fragments of stone, and in the texts of travelers, an impossible maze whose full form and purpose remain beyond reach. The unfinished obelisk of Aswan. The vast quarry of Aswan stretches along the eastern bank of the Nile, its pink granite walls rising in silent, sun-baked monoliths. Among them lies a giant block of stone, 4 times the height of a modern 2-story building, partially severed from the bedrock but never moved. It is the unfinished obelisk, a monumental relic of ambition, frozen mid-creation. The scale alone is staggering, a testament to an era when rulers sought to etch their power into stone with precision and permanence. For modern archaeologists and engineers, it poses an enduring puzzle: how the ancient Egyptians intended to carve and transport a structure of such enormity, and why the effort was ultimately abandoned. The obelisk, if completed, would have measured nearly 42 meters and weighed an estimated 1,200 tons, dwarfing any other stone object of its kind. It lies inverted in the quarry, the base still attached to the bedrock, while fractures along its sides suggest that the granite was prone to splitting. Ancient craftsmen had begun the process of chiseling out the sides, hollowing the mass with a technique that modern observers struggle to replicate even with contemporary equipment. Traces of tool marks reveal a combination of pounding and pecking, with copper chisels and dolerite pounding stones shaped into a rhythmic pattern across the granite surface. The precision is such that the obelisk's intended dimensions are evident, yet it seems to defy the limitations of the tools available at the time. Scholars have long debated why the project was abandoned. One possibility is that a critical flaw emerged. The granite may have cracked irreparably during initial chiseling, a discovery that would have rendered the enormous undertaking futile. Evidence supports this theory, with deep fissures running from the top down toward the base. Other researchers suggest that political or economic pressures may have intervened. Obelisks were commissioned to honor pharaohs and deities, and a shift in leadership or resources could have abruptly ended the work. Yet even if the practical reason is identified, the technological mastery displayed in the attempt continues to provoke questions. The techniques applied in the unfinished obelisk reveal a level of engineering sophistication remarkable for the period. Quarry workers understood how to measure and shape granite blocks to extreme tolerances, and they devised methods to extract massive stones without modern cranes. Some evidence hints at a system of wooden levers and ramps, though no conclusive model has survived. The obelisk's location itself suggests careful planning. Positioned on a natural incline, the workers likely intended to let gravity assist in lowering the monolith into position, a concept that requires both intuition and experience to execute successfully at such scale. Equally compelling are the cultural and symbolic dimensions. Obelisks were not merely monumental objects, they represented the sun god Ra and the pharaoh's eternal presence. The incomplete obelisk, frozen in its creation, may also have served as a teaching tool for subsequent artisans, a practical example of quarrying methods and a warning of the material's fragility. Its unfinished state allows modern observers to study a stage of construction that is otherwise invisible in completed monuments. No other surviving obelisk offers such intimate insight into the ancient Egyptians' quarrying techniques. Modern attempts to replicate the carving process have revealed the limits of contemporary technology when confronted with granite of this density. Even with power tools, shaping a monolith of equivalent size and precision would be an extraordinary challenge. Researchers conducting experimental archaeology have noted that sustaining uniform chisel strikes over the obelisk's full length would require dozens of skilled laborers working in unison for years. The scale of coordination and the understanding of material behavior demonstrated by the original workers remain astonishing. The unfinished obelisk continues to draw attention not only for its size, but for what it represents about the ambitions of a civilization already adept at manipulating some of the hardest stone on Earth. It embodies an intersection of artistry, devotion, and technical insight that has yet to be fully understood. Standing silently in the Aswan quarry, the obelisk casts a long shadow over the centuries, an incomplete dream carved in stone, a monument to human ingenuity and the limits of both nature and ambition. No other relic so clearly preserves the tension between mastery and failure, and the granite itself seems to whisper the questions that remain unanswered. The Black Pyramid of Amenemhat III, rising from the sands of the Black Pyramid, was once cloaked in polished limestone, a gleaming symbol of Amenemhat III's power and ambition. Today, it exists as a fractured skeleton, dark granite and collapsed limestone spilling across the desert, a monument to both human ingenuity and its limits. Travelers and archaeologists are drawn to its eerie presence, sensing in its crumbling form the weight of centuries and the silent testimony of failed perfection. Its silhouette, partially sunken and broken, hints at the careful planning that must have preceded its construction, even as it evokes questions that remain unresolved. Even in ruin, the pyramid's fractured core tells a story of ambition that exceeded its foundations. Unlike the grand and enduring structures of Giza, the Black Pyramid defies expectations, its decay suggesting miscalculations that modern engineers still struggle to explain. Chambers that should have remained hidden beneath layers of stone are exposed, stairways lead to collapsed ceilings, and the corridors, once precisely aligned, now funnel shadows that seem to speak of structural betrayal. Every fractured block is a reminder that even the most meticulous design is vulnerable to forces that remain partly inscrutable. Inside the pyramid, corridors twist at precise angles, revealing a careful plan that nevertheless faltered under the weight of its own ambition. The core was constructed using mud brick encased in limestone, a method intended to economize material and labor while maintaining grandeur. Drainage channels and internal passages suggest the architects anticipated pressure and sought to mitigate it, yet the very innovations that distinguish the pyramid may have contributed to its partial collapse. The layout hints at experimentation with scale and technique, as if the builders were testing the limits of materials, weight distribution, and the subtle forces of the desert environment. Archaeological surveys reveal traces of an elaborate network of voids and relieving chambers above the burial passage, an attempt to divert immense pressure that seems only partially successful. These hidden cavities demonstrate a level of foresight and structural ingenuity that rivals the most celebrated monuments of the Old Kingdom. Evidence of minor collapses within these chambers suggests that even with careful planning, the pyramid's internal stresses exceeded expectations. Modern imaging and ground-penetrating radar have allowed researchers to map these voids without disturbing the structure, providing rare insight into experimental architecture from an era when trial and error occurred on a monumental scale. For a ruler whose power stretched across the Nile, the pyramid was both a tomb and a testament to his dominion. Amenemhat III presided over a period of relative stability and prosperity, and his constructions reflect a desire to consolidate authority through monumental architecture. The Black Pyramid was intended to assert his divine connection and secure his legacy, yet its incomplete state adds a layer of historical irony. Even contemporary inscriptions and records emphasize pride in craftsmanship and devotion to the gods, underscoring the tension between human ambition and the unpredictable behavior of massive constructions. Despite careful planning, sections of the pyramid sank and crumbled, leaving gaps that defy definitive explanation. Modern surveys reveal that water infiltration and the weight of the overlying limestone casing may have caused the inner mudbrick core to deteriorate, but no single factor can fully account for the extent of the damage. Some experts propose that the builders underestimated the load-bearing properties of their chosen materials, while others suggest seismic activity or shifting sands contributed to the ruin. Each theory offers insight, yet none captures the full complexity of the forces that rendered the pyramid unstable, leaving its ultimate demise shrouded in uncertainty. The pyramid's incomplete state may have been more than accident. It could represent a deliberate confrontation with the limits of human control. Its design experiments with internal chambers, passage angles, and weight distribution demonstrate an awareness of engineering principles that exceeded the period's known conventions. Perhaps the failures served as cautionary lessons, as if the structure itself were intended to convey humility in the face of nature's immutable laws. Visitors today encounter a monument that is both a tomb and a testament, simultaneously proclaiming human mastery and highlighting its fragility. Even centuries later, the Black Pyramid stands as a dark question etched into the sands, refusing to yield its full secrets. Its shattered walls and hollowed chambers continue to challenge archaeologists and engineers, a silent puzzle whose fragments speak of ambition, experimentation, and the delicate boundary between creation and collapse. The desert wind moves through the ruins as it has for millennia, whispering the enigma of a structure that was meant to immortalize a king, yet now immortalizes uncertainty itself. The desert wind moves through the ruins as it has for millennia, whispering the enigma of a structure that was meant to immortalize a king, yet now immortalizes uncertainty itself. The Sakura bird. Buried among funerary offerings in a Sakura tomb, a small wooden figure lies almost forgotten, its shape unlike any known ritual object. Discovered in 1898 within the tomb of Padi Imen, an Egyptian official, the artifact has survived millennia, preserved in dry, stable conditions that shielded it from decay. Its unassuming size conceals a precision that immediately captures the attention of scholars and enthusiasts alike. Unlike statues of deities or typical ceremonial models, this object does not conform to conventional symbolism. Its presence in the tomb raises questions about the interplay between funerary practice and technological experimentation in the Old Kingdom, a puzzle that continues to intrigue researchers. Carved from sycamore wood, the object stretches just over 15 centimeters, its wings delicately tapered and balanced with unexpected precision. The tail extends slightly downward, while the body is hollowed to reduce weight, suggesting awareness of principles that govern movement through air. The surface bears traces of paint, hinting that color or decoration may have served symbolic or functional purposes. Every curve is subtle yet deliberate, and modern examination reveals symmetrical balance that seems far beyond simple artistic intent. Even without context, it is evident that the craftsman applied careful measurement and proportion, producing an object whose form invites speculation on function as much as aesthetic design. Researchers have noted that when placed on a miniature wind tunnel, the figure behaves with an unusual aerodynamic balance, gliding with surprising grace. Tests indicate that, under certain conditions, it could sustain flight along a predictable trajectory, although the mechanics remain debated. Some have argued that it functions as a toy, while others posit that it represents an early attempt to understand gliding or principles of flight. The figure's weight distribution, wing shape, and tail alignment are all consistent with objects engineered for controlled movement through the air. The fact that it appears isolated among tomb artifacts intensifies the mystery, leaving scholars to wonder whether it was practical experimentation, symbolic representation, or a blend of both. Within the tomb of an official, surrounded by offerings of pottery, food, and funerary models, the bird may have served as more than decoration, hinting at beliefs that remain elusive. It occupies a space that bridges the sacred and the practical, a small object amidst objects of eternal significance. The Egyptians associated birds with the soul and with flight into the afterlife, suggesting that the model could symbolize transcendence or the pharaoh's journey toward the divine. Yet the precision of its design introduces questions that go beyond spiritual metaphor, implying that the artisan possessed knowledge that could not have been purely intuitive. Some suggest it represents early experimentation with gliding or a conceptual exploration of the skies, though evidence is scarce. There is no documentation from the period describing its purpose, nor are there comparable artifacts of similar form and function. The absence of parallel examples makes the Saqqara bird a singular enigma, a small, deliberate creation that hints at an understanding of aerodynamics long before humans achieved powered flight. Its isolated existence intensifies the fascination, leaving open the possibility that knowledge of flight was at least imagined in a sophisticated, experimental sense. Because it alone offers aerodynamic understanding, the bird stands as a singular mystery among artifacts of its era. Even the most meticulous study of Old Kingdom craftsmanship cannot fully account for the subtle adjustments in balance, wing taper, and weight that make the figure glide successfully in controlled experiments. The small wooden model challenges assumptions about the boundaries of Egyptian ingenuity, forcing modern observers to reconcile the precision of ancient craftsmanship with the vast gaps in historical record. The small figure rests silently in its display case, a whisper of knowledge lost to time, as if the skies themselves held secrets the Egyptians never revealed. Its delicate wings, carefully carved and balanced, invite contemplation not just of what humans can achieve, but of what might have been imagined long before it could be realized. The Saqqara bird endures as a quiet, persistent reminder that even the smallest artifacts can hold mysteries that defy full explanation, hovering between the realms of ingenuity, ritual, and forgotten science. The Saqqara bird survives as a quiet, persistent reminder that even the smallest artifacts can hold mysteries that defy full explanation, hovering between the realms of ingenuity, ritual, and forgotten science. The Fayum mummy portraits. Millennia of burial have erased most traces, yet a select few faces remain astonishingly vibrant, defying both time and expectation. These small painted portraits, uncovered in the Fayum region of Egypt, present an uncanny realism that seems almost at odds with their age. Stripped from the anonymity of mummified wrappings, they offer a direct, almost immediate presence, as though the individuals they depict might awaken from slumber at any moment. Scholars have long been captivated not only by the striking resemblance to living features, but also by the subtlety and sophistication of the techniques employed. Each face is a window into a long-lost mastery that survived both human neglect and the ravages of time. Under the surface, contours of cheeks, the tilt of lips, and the depth of eyes hint at an understanding of human form that seems almost modern. The portraits convey not only anatomical accuracy, but also expression and character. Slight asymmetries, the way light seems to catch the pupils, and delicate colour transitions across skin and hair, all suggest deliberate choices by artisans attuned to both observation and representation. Unlike the stylized figures common in other Egyptian art, these images capture individuality, hinting at a society capable of nuanced artistic perception rarely credited to the period. Microscopic examination uncovers layers of pigment fused with wax, preserving colour in ways that continue to puzzle scientists. The encaustic technique, which involves applying coloured wax and heating it into the surface, or the use of tempera in some cases, created a resilience unmatched by most painted works of the era. Even exposure to humidity, handling, and shifting burial environments has left the pigments largely intact, their vibrancy defying expectations. Researchers remain uncertain how artisans controlled temperature, wax composition, and pigment mixtures with such consistency, raising questions about knowledge that may have been highly specialized and closely guarded. Recent spectroscopy analyses have revealed trace elements in the pigments that suggest artisans may have sourced rare minerals from distant regions, hinting at extensive trade networks. Furthermore, tiny inscriptions on the back of some panels indicate that certain portraits were commissioned with meticulous attention to social rank, linking material innovation to status and identity. These portraits were more than likenesses, they served as vessels of identity, connecting the living with the memory and status of the deceased. Placed over the faces of mummies, they ensured recognition and continuity, reinforcing social and familial bonds across generations. The images acted as visual anchors for the soul in the afterlife, reflecting Egyptian beliefs adapted under Roman influence. They are simultaneously practical and symbolic, blending the demands of funerary ritual with a startling sensitivity to individual identity. Through them, the dead could persist not just in name or lineage, but in the careful rendering of their countenance. Careful shading, proportion, and attention to individual features suggest an artisan capable of translating observation into enduring expression. The subtle gradations of colour imply not only skill, but understanding of light, anatomy, and perspective. Hair and jewellery are rendered with precision that conveys texture, while skin tones shift with convincing realism. Each portrait demonstrates a balance between technical mastery and artistic interpretation, revealing a command of craft that modern artists continue to admire. These works suggest that artisans were experimenting with realism in ways that prefigure centuries of portraiture, achieving effects that would not be widely replicated until much later in history. Modern analysis still cannot fully explain how pigments retained their vibrancy, or why the lifelike quality persists through the ages. While chemical studies have identified components of the pigments and wax, the interplay of materials and technique remains partially mysterious. How were mixtures prepared, applied, and preserved so consistently across different portraits and generations? Why have some works survived in near-perfect condition, while others have faded into obscurity? Each question deepens the intrigue, leaving the portraits suspended between art, science, and unexplained preservation. Each face remains an unspoken challenge, a whisper from the past that asks how knowledge and artistry once converged in ways we may never fully understand. The eyes seem to watch across centuries, the skin glows faintly as if alive, and the meticulous detail speaks of hands that combined observation, skill, and perhaps a kind of experimental courage. The Fayum portraits survive not merely as funerary objects, but as enigmatic testaments to human ingenuity, bridging the gap between mortality and memory, craftsmanship and mystery. These painted eyes hold a silent challenge, questioning how knowledge and artistry once converged in ways we may never fully grasp. The city of Herakleion beneath the sea. Stone columns rise from the waves, like spectral sentinels, remnants of a city swallowed by the sea long ago. Herakleion, once a bustling port at the mouth of the Nile, remained forgotten beneath layers of silt and salt water for centuries. Its discovery, in the late 20th century, startled archaeologists, revealing streets, temples, and statues preserved with astonishing clarity. The first dives through murky water, brought glimpses of marble pillars, fallen statues, and ceramic fragments, each one a fragment of life interrupted. The city seemed to float in suspended time, a place where history itself had paused, leaving observers to confront the scale of what had been lost and the profound questions surrounding its sudden disappearance. Sonar mapping and submersible dives revealed streets laid out in orderly grids, temples aligned with celestial markers, and harbours that once teemed with ships laden with trade goods. Excavation revealed monumental statues of pharaohs and gods, bronze figurines, and intricately carved stelae, all remarkably intact despite centuries underwater. Archaeologists were able to measure the foundations of massive buildings, noting how carefully the city had been planned to accommodate commerce, worship, and administration. Each dive exposed new surprises: intact wharfs, docked merchant vessels, and inscriptions hinting at a thriving population whose daily rhythms are now largely unknowable. Amid the ruins, merchant jars, ritual objects, and colossal temples testify to Herakleion's former prosperity. Objects crafted from stone, wood, and bronze suggest a city deeply connected to Mediterranean trade networks. Imported goods from Greece and the Levant indicate that Herakleion was not merely a regional hub, but a cosmopolitan centre where merchants, artisans, and priests intersected in daily life. The distribution of artifacts across streets and temple precincts offers insight into economic organization, religious practice, and civic hierarchy, painting a picture of a society sophisticated in both commerce and culture. Carved reliefs and statues display a mastery of proportion and detail that rivals contemporary Mediterranean art. Some statues retain traces of pigment and gilding, suggesting that color played a significant role in the city's aesthetic and ceremonial expression. Artisans appear to have combined traditional Egyptian techniques with Hellenistic influences, creating a hybrid style that hints at cultural exchange and innovation rarely documented in submerged sites. Inscriptions and imported goods reveal Herakleion as a nexus linking the Nile with Mediterranean trade, its citizens skilled in navigation, craftsmanship, and ritual. Temples dedicated to gods like Amun and Isis show the city's religious significance, while coins, amphorae, and pottery suggest intense commercial activity. The diversity of materials and styles unearthed points to cultural exchange on an unprecedented scale, highlighting a civilization that blended Egyptian tradition with Mediterranean influence. The ruins speak of a city that was vibrant, connected, and sophisticated, one whose population exercised knowledge and artistry in ways that modern observers can only partially reconstruct. Earthquakes, rising waters, and unstable soil may have conspired to engulf the city in a matter of moments, leaving no written record of its final hours. Geological studies indicate that the region was prone to subsidence, while tsunami-like events could have flooded streets and toppled temples. Accounts of nearby coastal settlements collapsing in similar conditions suggest that Herakleon's destruction was sudden, catastrophic, and irreversible. The city's disappearance beneath shifting sands and brackish water preserved it, yet it also obscured its final story, leaving archaeologists to infer tragedy from silence, collapse, and sediment. Indicating careful engineering, levees, canals, and wooden docks hint at the inhabitants' attempts to control flooding and preserve the harbour. Tools and repair materials recovered from the seabed imply a city in constant maintenance, a society aware of its environmental vulnerabilities, yet ultimately unable to prevent the inevitable. These traces of human effort offer a glimpse into the resilience of Herakleon's citizens and the suddenness with which their city succumbed to the sea. Even after decades of excavation, portions of the city remain hidden beneath layers of sand and mud, guarding secrets that may never be fully uncovered. Gaps in the mapped streets, undiscovered temples, and the possibility of sunken ships hint at a city larger and more complex than currently documented. Artifacts recovered from the seabed continue to surprise, offering new evidence of technological skill, trade sophistication, and cultural depth. Every dive into the submerged ruins uncovers tantalizing fragments, yet the complete picture remains elusive, leaving researchers to navigate both water and history in search of answers. The city sleeps beneath the waves, its silence a reminder that even the greatest civilizations can vanish without warning, leaving only echoes in sand and stone. The Dakhla Desert Glass. Under the relentless sun, the desert stretches into fields of shimmering, fractured glass, as if the ground itself had once ignited. Miles of fused silica scatter across the dunes, glinting in the heat like remnants of a fire frozen in time. The sheer scale of these glass fields astonishes observers, raising immediate questions about the forces required to create such a landscape. Some shards are translucent, others opaque, yet all share an almost surreal uniformity, as if a single cataclysmic event had swept through the sands. Walking among them, one cannot help but feel that the desert itself holds a memory of immense unknown energy. Surveyors have mapped the area with precision, revealing concentrations of glass spanning vast tracts of arid terrain. No ordinary wildfire or desert fire could have produced this level of heat over such an extensive area, and the distribution of fragments suggests an intensity both sudden and extreme. Patterns in the terrain imply that molten material may have flowed briefly across the surface before cooling, leaving behind fractured sheets and isolated nodules. The desert's silence contrasts sharply with the violence implied by the glass, hinting at an event powerful enough to reshape both ground and imagination. Analysis reveals the glass endured temperatures far beyond those produced by ordinary wildfires, raising questions about the source of such energy. Chemical studies show a near-pure silica composition, with traces of elements that suggest extremely high temperature conditions, possibly thousands of degrees Celsius. The uniformity of melting and the rapid cooling implied by the structure of the shards defy simple explanation. How such temperatures were achieved over an open landscape remains a mystery, inviting speculation about both natural and extraordinary phenomena. Microscopic analysis shows tiny spherules and shocked quartz embedded within some fragments, signatures often associated with high-energy impact. These minute traces suggest that the glass may have formed under conditions resembling those of a meteorite collision, hinting at a violent moment that left a permanent mark on the desert landscape. Some hypotheses point to meteorite or comet strikes, while others suggest rare lightning-induced events, each explanation partial and contested. The impact theory aligns with the evidence of extreme heat and scattered glass, yet no definitive crater has been identified. Lightning strikes confuse sand into glassy tubes called fulgurites, but the scale of Dakla exceeds any known example on Earth. Each proposed origin leaves gaps, forcing scientists to acknowledge that the desert itself may preserve secrets of events that defy conventional understanding. Archaeological finds indicate that pieces of the glass appear in nearby tombs and settlements, hinting that Egyptians recognized and perhaps revered its unusual properties. Some shards were shaped into jewelry, amulets, or ceremonial objects, suggesting a symbolic significance beyond mere curiosity. The glass may have been valued for its rarity, its strange beauty, or perhaps its connection to celestial phenomena. Its presence in human contexts raises questions about awareness, adaptation, and the cultural meaning assigned to materials born of extreme and mysterious forces. Some shards exhibit wear patterns and deliberate shaping, indicating that ancient craftsmen may have experimented with cutting, grinding, or polishing the material. The resilience and clarity of the glass would have made it highly desirable for tools, adornments, or ceremonial objects, suggesting that humans recognized its extraordinary properties and incorporated it into their culture in ways still being deciphered. The precise timing, method, and scale of the event that created the glass remain unresolved, leaving scientists to puzzle over a landscape shaped by forces almost forgotten. Radiometric dating suggests the formation may predate known historical events, yet correlation with regional geological evidence is incomplete. Did a cosmic strike trigger widespread melting, or did a combination of natural factors converge in a moment of catastrophic intensity? Each new study adds fragments of understanding, yet the desert continues to withhold its full story, challenging assumptions about both nature and ancient human interaction with it. Wind-sculpted dunes now cradle the glass shards, their shapes and angles preserving subtle clues about ancient environmental conditions. Patterns of erosion and deposition suggest shifting sands may have both protected and exposed the glass over millennia, creating a constantly changing archive of natural history. Each fragment tells a story, not only of extraordinary heat and energy, but of the desert's ceaseless influence, a reminder that even the harshest landscapes are active participants in the preservation and concealment of mystery. The desert shimmers with silent fire, a vast archive of energy and time whose origins may never be fully revealed. The Nabta Playa stone circle. Across the endless desert plain, upright stones break the monotony of sand, their arrangement deliberate yet inscrutable under the relentless Sunday. At first glance, the site seems ordinary, a scattering of rocks among dunes. Yet careful observation reveals patterns that suggest intention far beyond chance. Archaeologists have traced the alignments, noting clusters, rows, and circular arrangements that hint at purpose and planning. The stones rise from the earth like echoes of a vanished society, silent witnesses to human endeavor in a time when the desert was alive with rivers, lakes, and seasonal settlement. Each monument seems to guard secrets, both celestial and terrestrial, challenging the observer to decipher meaning across millennia. Excavations revealed buried stones, hearths, and remnants of prehistoric settlements, uncovering evidence of human activity dating back thousands of years. Pottery fragments, tools, and food remnants suggest seasonal occupation, likely timed with climatic cycles and water availability. Archaeologists have painstakingly mapped these features, revealing a complex network of habitation and ceremonial spaces. The discovery of aligned stones beneath layers of sediment suggests a continuity of use, indicating that the site was not a fleeting project, but a sustained focal point for human ritual and observation. Some stones exceed 3 meters in height, arranged in precise geometric patterns that suggest intentional design rather than random placement. Their weight and positioning imply an understanding of leverage and collective effort, though no contemporary record explains how such massive stones were transported. Smaller stones form concentric circles, while larger monoliths anchor sightlines that correspond with distant topographical markers. The careful selection of material hard, durable sandstone points to deliberate choices aimed at permanence, ensuring the site would endure long after the people who built it had vanished. Careful examination of the stones reveals traces of shaping and smoothing, suggesting that the builders employed rudimentary chisels or abrasion techniques. Geological analysis indicates that many of the monoliths were quarried from distant outcrops, requiring transport over several kilometers of desert terrain. These findings imply not only remarkable physical coordination, but also advanced planning, hinting at social organization capable of sustaining large-scale projects over extended periods. Measurements indicate alignments with solstices, rising stars, and possibly the Orion constellation, implying an understanding of the heavens rare for the era. Some stones mark sunrise and sunset on the longest and shortest days of the year, while others correspond to key stars that guided seasonal activities. This precision suggests that Nabta Playa functioned as an early astronomical observatory, encoding practical and ceremonial knowledge in stone. The builders likely used the sky as a calendar, tracking time and predicting natural cycles essential for survival in a challenging desert environment. Artifacts and hearths within the site hint at gatherings, rituals, and seasonal observances, suggesting the stones were more than markers, they were focal points of prehistoric life. Food remains, grinding stones, and symbolic objects imply communal activity, while evidence of fire pits points to extended stays during critical celestial events. The combination of settlement and ceremonial features indicates that Nabta Playa was both a practical center and a sacred landscape, where social cohesion and spiritual practice intertwined. Each excavation layer reveals traces of repeated activity, suggesting a ritualized rhythm that guided generations of inhabitants. Despite detailed mapping, the methods used to transport and position massive stones remain unclear, as does the full meaning encoded in their alignment. No tools or infrastructure have been found that definitively explain the movement of such weighty monoliths, leaving researchers to speculate about primitive engineering techniques. The alignment of stones to celestial bodies also raises questions about knowledge transfer, observation, and intention in a period traditionally considered technologically limited. Every measurement and excavation deepens the puzzle, underscoring the sophistication of a people whose cultural and scientific achievements continue to astonish. Wind and shifting sands obscure parts of the circle, yet the site retains an uncanny clarity when studied under the changing light of the desert. Shadows cast by the stones shift across the ground, emphasizing angles and alignments that may have guided ceremonies or signaled astronomical events. Even today, the desert's subtle movements preserve the essence of the site, revealing patterns that link human effort to the cosmos. Nabta Playa stands as a testament to ingenuity, observation, and belief, a landscape where earth and sky meet in deliberate harmony. The stones stand silent beneath the desert sun, their angles a riddle from a civilization that vanished into the sands, leaving only the sky to witness their intent. The star alignment of the pyramids. Mirroring the stars above, the pyramids stretch across the plateau, as if the desert had been arranged to reflect the heavens. Their colossal forms rise from the sands with a precision that continues to astonish engineers and astronomers alike. At first glance, they are simply monumental tombs, yet closer inspection reveals an intricate interplay of geometry and alignment. Each structure occupies a place in a larger plan, where angles, distances, and sightlines are calibrated with remarkable exactness. The plateau seems less a collection of buildings than a deliberate canvas translating celestial patterns into stone, an enduring testament to human ambition and observation. Early 20th century archaeologists, armed with rudimentary instruments, recorded angles so precise they seemed to defy the tools available to the builders. Surveys revealed that the sides of the pyramids align within a fraction of a degree to true north, a feat that challenges modern assumptions about ancient technology. Measurements taken with modern equipment confirm the ancient accuracy, highlighting a sophistication that surpasses casual construction. Scholars have debated how such precision could be achieved, speculating about sighting devices, plumb lines, and water leveling techniques, yet no definitive explanation survives from the era itself. Lines traced across the plateau reveal a network of measurements and alignments, suggesting not guesswork, but deliberate calculation at a monumental scale. The spacing between pyramids, the orientation of their corners, and the placement of subsidiary structures appear interconnected, forming a coherent plan that extends beyond the immediate horizon. Geometrical ratios and alignments indicate careful observation of angles and distances, hinting at a mastery of surveying principles that would not be formally codified until millennia later. The evidence suggests an intention not only to build tombs, but to inscribe knowledge into the very landscape. Mapping the pyramids against the night sky reveals striking correlations, their terrestrial positions echoing the stars that ancient Egyptians revered. The three main pyramids of Giza correspond in a pattern reminiscent of Orion's belt, a constellation associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. The relative brightness of the stars even appears mirrored in the relative sizes of the pyramids, though some scholars caution against overinterpretation. Observations of solar and stellar positions further suggest that the builders may have used celestial markers to guide both construction and ritual activity, blending practicality with symbolic meaning. Recent laser scanning and 3D modeling of the plateau reveal subtle adjustments in the pyramid's orientation that correspond to the precession of the stars over centuries. These minute corrections suggest that the builders accounted for shifts in celestial position, hinting at a long-term astronomical awareness previously thought impossible for the era. Such findings not only strengthen the connection to Orion, but also underscore the sophistication and foresight embedded in the pyramid's construction. Orion's association with Osiris imbued the pyramids with meaning beyond architecture, transforming stone into a bridge between Earth and afterlife. The alignment may have served as a cosmic map, guiding the soul of the pharaoh and connecting the living with the divine. Texts and inscriptions from later periods reference celestial order and the king's journey among the stars, suggesting a continuity of belief that may have begun with the pyramid's precise placement. In this context, the layout becomes not just a feat of engineering, but a spiritual statement, encoding religious cosmology into stone and sand. Even with modern instruments and centuries of study, the exact methods used to achieve such astronomical accuracy remain elusive, leaving their purpose partly obscured by time. Theories abound, from simple visual sighting along the Nile to complex shadow and star observations, yet no single explanation fully accounts for the precision achieved. Each hypothesis opens new questions about the knowledge, organization, and skill of the builders, underscoring the extraordinary achievement of a civilization that operated without the conveniences of modern measurement or technology. The plateau itself seems alive with the weight of intent, as if every stone were both anchor and pointer, tethering human aspiration to the cosmos. Light shifts across the pyramids throughout the day and year, casting shadows that trace invisible lines and accentuate alignments once used to to mark time and celestial events. Scholars and visitors alike sense that these monuments were conceived with a dual vision: to honor the dead and to mirror the heavens, a fusion of mortality and eternity rendered in limestone and granite. The pyramids stand in silent alignment with distant stars, monuments to knowledge and ambition that continue to guard secrets written across the sky. The curse phenomenon of Tutankhamun's tomb. When the sealed entrance of Tutankhamun's tomb was finally opened, the air of the Valley of the Kings seemed charged with something both ancient and ominous. Dust rose from centuries of undisturbed burial chambers, and the flickering lamplight revealed walls lined with gold, painted reliefs, and carefully arranged treasures. The tomb was unlike any previously discovered, a near-complete snapshot of a boy king's afterlife preparations. From the moment Howard Carter and his team stepped across the threshold, a sense of awe mingled with unease, as if the weight of history pressed upon every stone. Yet within the wonder lay the seeds of a story that would capture the imagination of the modern world. Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon meticulously documented the interior, cataloguing chests, jewelry, statues, and ceremonial objects with painstaking care. Every artifact was photographed, described, and numbered, the work methodical and precise. Their methodical approach was necessary, as the tomb's fragile treasures had survived millennia largely intact. Yet beyond the scholarly rigor, observers sensed an air of danger, a combination of isolation, heat, and the unknown that surrounded them in the sealed chambers. The team worked cautiously, aware of the history layered into every corridor and sarcophagus, and the public awaited news that would ignite fascination and fear alike. Within months, the news of Lord Carnarvon's sudden death fueled speculation that the tomb carried a deadly secret, a curse inscribed in myth rather than stone. The young Earl's collapse after a mosquito bite became a headline in newspapers worldwide, and coincidences among other team members' illnesses were sensationalized. Some believed the curse targeted those who disturbed the pharaoh's rest, punishing intrusion with lethal consequences. Stories proliferated of mysterious ailments, fainting, and accidents, each account magnified as evidence of supernatural retribution. The narrative took on a life of its own, shaped as much by fear and imagination as by fact. Headlines proclaimed a mummy's curse, capturing imaginations worldwide and intertwining fact with folklore in a way that persists to this day. Newspapers chronicled each subsequent death among those associated with the tomb, drawing connections that were tenuous or coincidental. Lectures, books, and articles stoked the legend, and even skeptics found themselves drawn to the idea that an ancient warning had survived millennia. The power of the curse lay not in its verifiable impact, but in the story it allowed people to tell, merging ancient superstition with modern fascination for the unknown. Analysis of the tomb environment reveals mold, bacteria, and other pathogens that could account for illness, offering a rational perspective on events once attributed to supernatural forces. Aspergillus and other fungi thrive in enclosed, humid spaces, and exposure can trigger respiratory failure or exacerbate existing conditions. Dust containing ancient microbial life, combined with heat and fatigue, created circumstances in which disease was far more likely. Some deaths were coincidental or caused by unrelated factors, yet the human mind, inclined to pattern and meaning, link them to the tomb itself, giving rise to enduring myth. Air samples taken from the tomb reveal concentrations of ammonia and other volatile compounds released from decomposing organic matter, a hidden danger that could trigger dizziness, nausea, or respiratory distress. Even the smallest breaches in the sarcophagi or storage containers might have released these chemicals into confined spaces, exposing early excavators to hazards that modern science only recently began to understand. Such factors provide tangible explanations for some of the sudden illnesses attributed to the so-called curse, without diminishing the awe or reverence inspired by the tomb's treasures. Defying scientific explanation, the allure of a curse continues to captivate, a reminder that history and legend often overlap. The psychological impact on those entering the tomb cannot be discounted. The combination of fear, expectation, and isolation amplified both perception and reaction. Tourists, scholars, and modern explorers report a lingering sense of unease, as if the walls themselves remember the disturbance and respond in silence. The tomb remains a place of reverence, a reminder that the past carries power not only in fact, but in the stories we choose to believe. Even now, the tomb of Tutankhamun preserves its treasures and secrets, silent under the Egyptian Sunday. Gold, painted wood, and stone artifacts survive as echoes of a life interrupted far too soon, a civilization's devotion to the afterlife etched into every chamber. The legend of the curse endures, a complex weave of coincidence, biology, and human imagination, challenging us to separate truth from superstition. The tomb remains silent, yet whispers of its supposed curse linger, echoing across generations as both warning and fascination. The secret chemistry of Egyptian blue, nestled among tomb paintings and gilded artifacts, vivid panels of blue draw the eye, their hue seeming to defy time and decay. Millennia of exposure have left the pigment remarkably intact, its brilliance a testament to ancient ingenuity. In the dim corridors of tombs and temples, the colour persists, an almost impossible vibrancy that seems to hover between art and science. Archaeologists marvel not only at its aesthetic appeal, but also at the way it withstands the ravages of centuries, resisting the fading and flaking that claim other pigment. Egyptian blue is more than decoration. It is evidence of a civilization capable of manipulating materials with precision that challenges modern expectations. Excavations across Egypt reveal the pigment's presence from early dynastic tombs to later temples, marking it as a staple of artistic and ceremonial expression. Fragments appear on statues, reliefs, and sarcophagi, while shards in workshops suggest large-scale production. Its consistent use over centuries implies standardized techniques passed down among generations of artisans. The prevalence of Egyptian blue underscores its cultural importance, yet it also raises questions about the scientific knowledge embedded in what was assumed to be purely aesthetic practice. Combining silica, copper, calcium, and an alkali flux, and then fusing them under heat, the material achieves a crystalline structure of notable resilience. This combination represents the first known synthetic pigment in human history, a deliberate fusion rather than a naturally occurring mineral. The process creates a calcium-copper silicate compound that resists chemical breakdown, explaining its enduring vibrancy. Such a material could not have been produced by accident. It demanded careful experimentation, observation, and control, highlighting a level of empirical sophistication rarely attributed to antiquity. Furnace temperatures had to be carefully controlled and materials precisely measured, suggesting artisans possessed both skill and empirical understanding of chemical reactions. Kilns capable of reaching and sustaining the required heat were carefully engineered, and the mixture of ingredients required exact ratios. The creation of Egyptian blue was not casual artistry, but a deliberate technological achievement, one that integrated knowledge of fire, minerals, and chemistry into a repeatable method. Each batch carried the mark of discipline and mastery, a silent dialogue between human ingenuity and elemental forces. Workshops appear to have experimented with heating times and ingredient ratios to perfect hue and durability, as revealed by microscopic analysis of pigment remnants. These differences indicate a culture of practical experimentation where trial and observation were integral to mastery. Evidence of pigment fragments at distant archaeological sites hints at early trade networks, revealing that Egyptian blue was valued not only for its beauty, but also as a commodity that carried technological and cultural weight across regions. Under ultraviolet light, traces of Egyptian blue emit a faint infrared luminescence, revealing a property unknown to the ancients, yet preserved perfectly through millennia. Modern scientists have used this glow to identify the pigment even when it appears invisible to the naked eye, uncovering hidden images and inscriptions in tombs. The luminescence also hints at why the pigment may have been favoured for sacred spaces. It creates subtle radiance under torchlight, enhancing the sense of otherworldly presence. This discovery bridges the gap between ancient artistry and modern technology, showing that Egyptian blue continues to surprise and inspire. The pigment's brilliant hue symbolized the heavens and divinity, enhancing tomb paintings and statuary with a visual intensity that carried spiritual resonance. Blue adorned the hair of gods, the robes of pharaohs, and celestial motifs, linking the material world to the divine. Its symbolic weight amplified the aesthetic, turning walls and artifacts into conduits for religious and cosmological ideas. The color became a language in itself, a medium that communicated power, eternity, and the divine favor of rulers and gods alike. Resisting full understanding, the techniques leave scholars debating their conception, the absence of documentation, and the centuries over which their practice vanished. No surviving texts explain the precise methods or the principles behind the pigment, leaving modern researchers to reconstruct processes through analysis and experimentation. The secret of Egyptian blue persists, locked in the crystalline structures of its compounds, challenging assumptions about the scientific understanding of ancient Egypt. The color survives not merely as a visual marvel, but as a chemical enigma, a testament to a civilization whose knowledge has both endured and quietly vanished. The mystery of moving megaliths. Some stones weigh dozens of tons, their smooth surfaces and precise placement challenging the imagination and the laws of physics. Towering blocks form walls, temples, and monuments whose sheer scale suggests a level of coordination and strength that modern engineers still struggle to replicate. Each stone bears the mark of human effort, yet conceals the methods used to transport it across desert plains or rugged terrain. The question persists: how did ancient civilizations move such massive weights without cranes, wheels, or motorized machinery? The answer remains tantalizingly out of reach, as each observation deepens both admiration and bewilderment. Ancient inscriptions and accounts hint at methods long forgotten, yet none describe the full process of moving these massive blocks. Reliefs show teams of workers hauling stones with ropes, dragging sledges, or pushing levers, but these depictions offer only partial insight. No manuals or detailed instructions survive, leaving scholars to interpret fragments of evidence and reconcile them with the physical realities of stone, friction, and distance. Even the most meticulous records cannot fully account for the precision with which these megaliths were aligned, leveled, and set into place. Traces of sledges and grooves in quarry floors suggest that massive stones were dragged over great distances, though the exact techniques remain elusive. Some paths show wear patterns indicating repeated use, while others reveal attempts to reduce friction through wet sand or lubricated tracks. Quarry marks hint at controlled shaping before transport, but the leap from extraction to final placement remains a profound puzzle. The scale of coordination, manpower, and ingenuity required challenges assumptions about ancient labor organization and the limits of pre-industrial technology. Hinting at an extensive logistical network are the remnants of temporary roads, wooden rollers, and support structures uncovered in archaeological surveys. Teams of workers likely followed carefully planned routes, with coordination of supplies, water, and food essential to maintain momentum over long distances. Such infrastructure implies not only physical strength, but also remarkable administrative skill, suggesting that moving a single stone was a feat of both engineering and management. Questions about efficiency and feasibility for the largest stones persist, despite experiments using wooden sleds, wet sand, and coordinated teams that demonstrate plausible methods. Even with careful planning, a block weighing over 50 tons would require hundreds of people, precise timing, and almost ritualized coordination to prevent disaster. Modern reconstructions replicate some results, moving stones short distances, but scaling these methods to the lengths documented in ancient construction tests, both engineering and human endurance. Each experiment confirms possibility, but fails to capture the full scale and finesse of the original work. From Stonehenge to the temples of Baalbek, civilizations across the world confronted similar challenges, moving enormous stones without mechanized assistance. The global recurrence of such feats suggests a shared human drive to manipulate the environment on a monumental scale. Yet the techniques vary widely, reflecting adaptation to local materials, terrain, and cultural priorities. These comparative examples underline the universality of the problem while highlighting the unique ingenuity required in each case. Even where partial solutions can be demonstrated, the precision achieved in the original construction continues to defy easy explanation. Recent studies suggest that ancient engineers may have employed simple but sophisticated tools, levers, rollers, counterweights, and inclined planes, combined with meticulous observation of friction and surface conditions. Analysis of wear patterns, stone shapes, and tool marks points to a level of empirical experimentation rarely attributed to ancient builders. They understood not only the materials, but also how human effort could be maximized through geometry, leverage, and coordination. Yet the full methodology remains unknown, a silent code embedded in stone that challenges replication. Even with modern simulations, computer models, and experimental archaeology, the ingenuity of ancient engineers surpasses what can be easily replicated, leaving modern observers in awe. Each megalith, perfectly set and enduring through millennia, stands as both evidence of skill and a riddle that continues to intrigue scientists, engineers, and historians alike. The techniques, knowledge, and sheer human determination that brought these stones from quarry to monument remain as elusive as the desert winds that have carried their shadows across the ages. The megaliths stand as silent witnesses, their journey from quarry to monument a puzzle that continues to defy explanation. The mysterious Saqqara shaft complex. At the heart of Saqqara, deep vertical chasms cut into limestone rise as silent voids, their depth and precision unsettling to those who peer into their shadows. The shafts seem to vanish into darkness almost immediately, narrow entrances giving way to sheer drops that challenge perception. Sunlight barely penetrates the first few meters, leaving only faint outlines of walls and stone surfaces visible. The sheer scale of these excavations suggests deliberate planning, yet their purpose remains enigmatic, leaving observers to wonder whether they were designed for the living, the dead, or something beyond human understanding. Early surveys revealed a series of shafts descending sharply into bedrock, their dimensions and alignment meticulously recorded, yet yielding few clues about intent. Archaeologists noted the precision with which each corridor was carved, the consistency of angles and widths, and the sharp verticality that distinguishes them from typical burial shafts. Mapping the complex became an exercise in patience and careful observation, as each descent posed physical challenges and offered few tangible discoveries. Despite detailed records, the reasoning behind such elaborate construction eludes definitive interpretation. Narrow corridors, abrupt turns, and sudden drop-offs suggest a deliberate design, challenging conventional explanations of burial or storage. The shafts do not conform to standard tomb layouts, and their irregular configuration hints at symbolic or functional purposes beyond the mundane. Some shafts widen into chambers without apparent reason, while others terminate abruptly, leaving empty spaces that raise more questions than answers. The very geometry of the complex seems intended to confound or to signify meanings now lost to time. Fragments of pottery, faint inscriptions, and traces of human activity hint at use, but nothing conclusively explains why such verticality was chosen. Evidence of soot suggests fires were lit at various levels, perhaps for illumination or ritual, yet no burial remains or offerings have been found in some of the deepest shafts. Geological analysis shows that the limestone was carefully selected and chiseled, further demonstrating intentionality in construction. Even the most mundane findings acquire significance within the context of these unnerving vertical passages. Some of the deeper shafts intersect with natural fissures in the limestone, suggesting that the builders may have incorporated the existing geology into their design. Evidence of careful reinforcement around these intersections indicates awareness of structural risks, implying a sophisticated understanding of the rock's behavior. The choice to integrate natural formations could have held symbolic meaning, merging the work of human hands with the contours of the earth in ways that remain opaque to modern interpretation. Since ground-penetrating radar has detected voids and anomalies beyond the known sections, the complex may contain chambers yet to be explored. These hidden recesses may contain objects, inscriptions, or arrangements that could clarify the shaft's purpose, but current technology and safety concerns limit access. The existence of these unseen spaces perpetuates the sense that the complex was designed to withhold knowledge, preserving its secrets beneath layers of stone and time. Some scholars propose that the shafts mirrored cosmic pathways linking Earth to the stars, while others see them as ceremonial conduits for funerary rites. The alignment of certain shafts with solstices or cardinal points has led to theories that the complex functioned as a terrestrial reflection of celestial order. Others suggest the shafts were designed to channel spiritual energy, a path for souls to traverse after death. The diversity of interpretation underscores the absence of definitive evidence, leaving each hypothesis as compelling as it is unprovable. Structural instability, darkness, and inaccessible depths have thwarted complete investigation, leaving the complex an enduring riddle for archaeologists and historians alike. Rope ladders, climbing equipment, and modern lighting only partially illuminate the shaft's full extent, and the potential for collapse restricts deeper exploration. As technology advances, surveys using remote sensing and 3D mapping provide more data, yet the human experience of descending these voids remains limited. Each exploration adds pieces to the puzzle, but the overarching purpose continues to evade understanding. Recent analysis of tool marks suggests that the shafts were carved with techniques requiring precise control and considerable labor. Artisans likely coordinated in teams, applying consistent pressure to chisels and mallets, carefully avoiding fractures that could compromise the entire structure. The absence of wear in some sections indicates that the shafts were either seldom used or treated as sacred spaces, further complicating interpretations of their function. Every scratch and groove preserved in stone invites speculation, yet the reason for their arrangement remains just out of reach. The shafts descend into silence, holding their secrets beneath centuries of stone and shadow, inviting speculation but never revealing their full story.